The rain hit my windshield like bullets that night, each drop exploding against the glass as I drove through the winding streets of Willowbrook Heights. My phone buzzed incessantly on the passenger seat, work messages demanding my attention even at this ungodly hour. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to discover when I turned into my sister's driveway. There, sprawled motionless on the perfectly manicured lawn, was my 6-year-old son, Finn. His small body lay crumpled next to a shattered toy car, rain soaking through his thin pajamas. My heart stopped. I slammed on the brakes, threw the car into park, and ran to him through the storm. "Mommy?" His voice was barely a whisper, lips blue from the cold, tiny body trembling uncontrollably. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." I scooped him into my arms, feeling how ice-cold his skin had become. "Aunt Serena." She pushed me. I was singing. He managed to say between chattering teeth. I looked up at the house, my sister's mansion glowing warmly from within, and felt something dark and primal awaken in my chest. This was the moment everything changed. I had always been the responsible one in the Vance family. While Serena played dress-up and collected followers on social media, I worked myself to the bone building a tech company from nothing. While she threw parties and spent our parents' money on designer handbags, I scraped together every penny to provide for Finn after his father abandoned us. And through it all, I endured their constant reminders of my place in the family hierarchy. Harper's always been the practical one. My mother would say with that particular tone that made practical sound like a consolation prize. Not glamorous like Serena, but useful. For 34 years, I had accepted this role. The dutiful daughter who asked for nothing, the sister who cleaned up messes, the single mother who made do with hand-me-downs, while Serena strutted around in designer gowns. I told myself it was temporary, that things would get better, that family meant everything. But as I held my freezing son in that storm, watching the warm light spill from Serena's windows while she left a child to potentially die in the cold, I realized I had been a fool. The front door of the house swung open, and Serena appeared in the doorway. She stood there in a silk evening dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her hair perfectly styled, a crystal tumbler of something expensive in her manicured hand. When she saw us, she didn't rush out to help. She didn't even look concerned. "Oh, he's still alive?" She called out over the sound of the rain, her voice carrying that familiar note of annoyance. "I thought I'd solved that noise problem for good. Maybe you should actually parent your kid, Harper. I have important calls to make." Something inside me snapped. I stood up slowly, Finn secure in my arms, and looked at my sister with new eyes. Not with the desperate hope for approval I'd carried my whole life, but with the cold clarity of someone who had finally seen the truth. "You just assaulted my child and left him to freeze in a storm?" I said, my voice steady despite the fury building in my chest. "You're going to pay for this, Serena. Everything you have, everything you think makes you untouchable, it's all going to disappear." She laughed, actually laughed. "Poor little Harper, always living in my shadow, trying to threaten me. Have you forgotten which one of us actually has power in this family?" I didn't respond. I simply walked back to my car, buckled Finn into his seat, and drove away, leaving Serena standing in her doorway with that smug expression on her face. She had no idea what she had just unleashed. At the hospital, as doctors checked Finn for hypothermia and treated the bruises on his arm where Serena had grabbed him, I called our parents. "I should have known better. Serena's under a lot of stress with the wedding planning," my father said when I explained what had happened. "Don't make this into something bigger than it is, Harper. Maybe Finn was bothering her," my mother added, as if she was discussing a neighbor's complaint about a barking dog. "You know how she gets with loud noises. My son nearly died of exposure," I said, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles went white. "And you're making excuses for her. Don't be so dramatic, dear, and please don't ruin your sister's special day like you've ruined everything else in your life." I hung up on them. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my parents in the middle of a conversation. Immediately, a text arrived from my mother. "Don't destroy your sister's happiness the way you destroyed your own, Harper." I deleted the message and looked at Finn sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, finally warm and safe. They thought they knew me. They thought I was still the same Harper, who would swallow any insult, endure any humiliation, accept any crumb of affection they threw my way. They were wrong. What they didn't know was that over the past 5 years, while they dismissed me as practical Harper with her little computer job, I had built Phoenix Tech into a multi-million-dollar empire. I had connections they couldn't imagine, resources they had never bothered to ask about, and most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I began making calls. Not desperate calls begging for help or understanding, but calculated moves in a game they didn't even know we were playing. "Thompson, Harding, and Associates," came the crisp voice of my attorney. "Patricia, it's Harper Vance. I need you to handle something for me, discreetly." Within hours, I had 3 of the city's top law firms on retainer, ready to move when I gave the word. But legal action would come later. First, I needed to dismantle Serena's perfect world piece by piece. My next call was to Grandeur Manor, the most exclusive wedding venue in the state, where Serena had booked her dream wedding for the following weekend. The venue had been in her Instagram posts for months, evidence of her superior taste and unlimited budget. "This is Harper Vance, CEO of Phoenix Tech," I said to the venue coordinator. "I'd like to discuss purchasing your facility outright." By noon, I owned Grandeur Manor, not rented, not booked-owned. Serena's deposit was refunded due to unforeseen changes in ownership. The apologetic call they made to her must have been delicious. But I wasn't finished. I systematically contacted every vendor Serena had hired for her wedding. The renowned florist who was supposed to provide white roses and peonies, I booked them for a corporate event the same day. The celebrity chef who was going to cater the reception, I hired his entire team for a charity gala. The string quartet, the photographer, the cake artist, every single person she had carefully selected to make her day perfect, was suddenly unavailable. Then I called Leo Maxwell, a cybersecurity expert I'd worked with on several Phoenix Tech projects. Leo had a particular talent for retrieving digital information when necessary. "Harper, what can I do for you?" He answered on the first ring. "I need you to access the security camera footage from 1247 Maple Grove Avenue. Last night, around 9 p.m. There was a pause. "That's specific. What exactly are we looking for?" "The truth," I said simply. "I need video evidence of what happened to my son, and I need it disseminated in the most effective way possible." Leo was quiet for a moment, then said, "Send me the details. I'll have what you need by tonight." The footage was everything I had hoped for and more. The high-definition cameras captured every horrifying detail: Serena striking Finn with her designer slipper when he knocked over her drink while singing a nursery rhyme. Her face twisted with rage as she grabbed his small arm and dragged him toward the door. The callous way she shoved him out into the storm and locked the door behind him. And perhaps most damning of all, the image of her returning to her drink and her phone while my son pounded weakly on the door, begging to come back inside. Leo had edited it into a devastating 3-minute video, complete with timestamps and clear audio. It was impossible to misinterpret or excuse away. "When do you want this to go live?" he asked. "Friday afternoon," I said, "right after she realizes the wedding is impossible." The calls started that Thursday. First, the venue cancellation. Then, one by one, every vendor. Serena's voice messages grew increasingly hysterical as the day progressed. "You bitch!" she screamed into my voicemail around 3 p.m. "I know this is you. I know you're behind this somehow. You're pathetic, Harper. Pathetic and jealous, and you always have been." By evening, she was sobbing. "Please, Harper, please. I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm sorry. Just tell me what you want. I'll do anything." But it was too late for apologies. Far too late. Friday afternoon, as planned, the video went viral. Leo had uploaded it to multiple social media platforms simultaneously, each post titled simply, "The Real Serena Vance." Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times, picked up by local news stations, and was trending on every platform that mattered. The comments were unanimous in their outrage. Child welfare advocates shared it with demands for investigation. Parenting groups used it as an example of unacceptable behavior. Even celebrities began commenting, expressing their shock and disgust. But I wasn't done yet. Saturday morning, the day that was supposed to be Serena's wedding day, I threw open the doors of Grandeur Manor for something entirely different. "Welcome to Phoenix Tech's first annual celebration of maternal strength and resilience," I announced to the crowd of over 200 guests. I had invited everyone who mattered in our social circle, every business contact, every family friend. The only people not invited were Serena and my parents. Finn, dressed in a tiny tuxedo and beaming with health and happiness, was the guest of honor. The venue had been transformed into a beautiful celebration of motherhood and perseverance, with professional photographers documenting every moment. I gave a speech that brought many guests to tears, talking about the challenges of single motherhood, the importance of protecting children, and the strength that comes from overcoming adversity. I shared the story of Phoenix Tech's founding, how I had built it from nothing while raising Finn, how every late night and early morning had been worth it to provide for him. The presentation included a slideshow of photos showing our journey together, Finn drawing pictures while I worked at our kitchen table, our first apartment with its secondhand furniture. The moment I signed Phoenix Tech's first major contract while he napped in a playpen in my office. Every image told the story of a mother who had refused to give up, who had built something meaningful from scratch. The crowd was captivated. Several investors approached me with new opportunities. A major news outlet asked for an interview about women in tech. 3 different publishers wanted to discuss book deals. Just as I was accepting congratulations from the mayor's wife, the main doors burst open. Serena stood there in her wedding dress, a $15,000 creation of silk and lace that now looked absurdly out of place. Her makeup was streaked with tears, her hair disheveled from the wind. She looked around in confusion at the elegant charity gala where her wedding reception should have been. The room fell silent as she stumbled forward, clearly searching for some trace of her planned celebration. That's when someone's phone rang, and the local news anchor's voice filled the quiet space. In breaking news tonight, a video showing local socialite Serena Vance assaulting and abandoning a 6-year-old child has sparked outrage across the community. Every person in the room turned to stare at Serena as the video played on multiple phone screens. The footage was even more damning when viewed by a room full of parents, community leaders, and child advocates. Sterling Hayes, Serena's fiancé, had been seated at the head table as an honored guest at my charity event. He was a decent man, a successful attorney who had genuinely seemed to care for Serena. As he watched the video, his face went through a progression of emotions: shock, disgust, and finally, cold resolve. He stood up slowly, walked over to where Serena stood trembling in her wedding gown, and without a word, removed the engagement ring from his pocket that he had clearly planned to return to her privately. Instead, he dropped it at her feet in front of 200 witnesses. "I cannot and will not marry someone capable of this," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "Don't ever contact me again." He walked out without looking back, and I almost felt sorry for Serena. Almost. My parents arrived moments later, having finally heard about the video, and rushed over to salvage what they could of the situation. They took in the scene: the charity gala, the crowd of people they knew socially, their daughter in a wedding dress with tears streaming down her face, and the engagement ring glittering on the floor like a fallen star. "What have you done?" my mother whispered, looking at me with something approaching fear. Serena dropped to her knees, not caring that her dress was getting dirty, and pointed at me with a shaking hand. "She did this. She ruined everything. She's always been jealous of me, and now she's destroyed my life." I walked over to where she knelt and looked down at her. For just a moment, I remembered the sister I had once idolized, the golden child who had seemed to have everything I wanted. But that memory was quickly replaced by the image of Finn lying cold and alone in the rain. "I didn't ruin your life, Serena," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You did that all by yourself the moment you decided it was acceptable to assault a child and leave him to die in a storm. I simply made sure the world could see who you really are." I bent down and picked up Sterling's ring, then walked over to where Finn was standing with his new child psychologist, Dr. Martinez, who had become a trusted friend and advocate for him. "Here, sweetheart," I said, offering him the ring. "This belongs to Aunt Serena, but I don't think you need anything from her." Finn looked at the sparkling diamond, then at Serena, who was still sobbing on the floor. With the matter-of-fact wisdom that only children possess, he walked over to a nearby trash can and dropped the ring inside. "She's not a good person," he said simply, his small voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. I turned to face my parents, who were standing frozen in shock. "You taught Serena that there were no consequences for cruelty," I said. "I'm teaching Finn that there always are." The aftermath was swift and total. By Monday morning, Serena had lost every endorsement deal, every brand partnership, every source of the income that had funded her lifestyle. The video had been picked up by national news outlets, and "Justice for Finn" had become a trending hashtag. Child Protective Services opened an investigation. The local district attorney's office announced they were reviewing the case for possible criminal charges. Several high-profile child advocacy organizations issued statements condemning her actions and praising me for speaking out. But perhaps most satisfying of all was the silence from my parents. They had always communicated through Serena, using her as their golden child spokesperson. Now that she was thoroughly disgraced, they seemed to have nothing to say to me at all. Finn thrived in the weeks that followed. Dr. Martinez worked with him to process what had happened, and he bounced back with the resilience that children possess when they know they are truly loved and protected. He started having nightmares less frequently, began singing again, and even drew me pictures of our big party at Grandeur Manor. Phoenix Tech's profile soared following the charity gala. The story of the tech CEO, who had overcome adversity while raising her son alone, resonated with people across the country. I was invited to speak at conferences, featured on magazine covers, and approached by major corporations wanting to partner with us. 3 months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $100,000 and a note in Sterling's handwriting: "For Finn's future. Thank you for showing me the truth before it was too late." I looked at the check for a long moment, then methodically tore it into tiny pieces and threw it away. We didn't need his money or his guilt. We had something far more valuable: we had each other, and we had the truth. The encounter I had been both dreading and anticipating came on a sunny Saturday afternoon in late spring. Finn and I were grocery shopping at the local market when I saw her behind the checkout counter at the end of aisle 3. Serena had lost at least 20 pounds, and not in a healthy way. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a standard-issue store uniform. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and there was a hollowness in her eyes that spoke of dreams thoroughly shattered. She looked up as we approached her register, and for a moment, our eyes met. I saw recognition, shame, and something that might have been regret. But I also saw the same selfishness that had always defined her, a focus on her own suffering rather than remorse for what she had done to Finn. I guided our cart to a different checkout lane without a word. There was nothing left to say between us, and Finn deserved to enjoy his Saturday without being reminded of that terrible night. "Mommy," Finn said as we loaded groceries into our car, "can we get ice cream today?" I looked down at my son, healthy and happy and safe, and felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with love. "We can get the biggest ice cream sundae they make," I told him, lifting him into his car seat. "Today is a perfect day for celebrating." As we drove away from the market, I caught a glimpse of Serena in my rearview mirror. She was standing in the store's doorway, watching us leave, still wearing that uniform that represented the complete collapse of everything she had once believed made her superior to me. But I felt no satisfaction in seeing her brought low, no joy in her obvious misery. What I felt was something far more powerful: freedom. Freedom from the desperate need for her approval, freedom from the family dynamics that had kept me small, and freedom to build the life that Finn and I deserved. That evening, as Finn played in our backyard and I worked on my laptop, I received an email from a major publisher interested in my story. They wanted me to write a book about overcoming family toxicity and building success as a single mother. The advance they were offering was substantial, but more importantly, they saw value in my experience, in the lessons I had learned through pain and perseverance. I thought about all the women who might be sitting in their cars right now, wondering if they deserved better than the scraps of affection they were receiving from people who should love them unconditionally. I thought about the mothers who were sacrificing their own dreams to prop up family members who would never appreciate those sacrifices. I thought about the daughters who were still waiting for parents who would never see their worth. "I'd like to discuss this further," I typed back. "I have a story that needs to be told." Phoenix Tech continued to grow, expanding into 3 new markets and earning recognition as one of the fastest-growing companies in our sector. I was invited to join boards, speak at universities, and mentor other entrepreneurs. The scared, desperate Harper who had driven through that storm was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and refused to accept less than she deserved. Finn started first grade that fall, confident and bright and kind. His teacher told me he was one of the most empathetic children she had ever taught, always looking out for classmates who seemed sad or lonely. The trauma he had experienced hadn't hardened him. Instead, it had given him an early understanding of how precious safety and love really are. Sometimes, late at night when I was working and he was asleep, I would think about that moment in the storm when I found him on Serena's lawn. It had been the worst moment of my life, but it had also been the moment that saved us both. It was the moment I stopped accepting unacceptable treatment and started fighting for the life we deserved. I never spoke to my parents again after that night at Grandeur Manor. They made no effort to reach out, to apologize, or to repair what had been broken. Their silence spoke volumes about where their priorities had always been, and I found that I was grateful for the clarity. Some relationships are too toxic to salvage, even when they come with the label of family. A year later, I was featured on the cover of Forbes magazine as one of their Women to Watch. The accompanying article detailed Phoenix Tech's success, my advocacy for single mothers in business, and my commitment to child welfare causes. There was a photo of Finn and me in our home office, both of us smiling, as he showed off a drawing he had made of our superhero team. The article mentioned, in passing, that I had declined to comment on questions about my family background, stating only that I preferred to focus on the future rather than the past. It was a diplomatic way of saying that some stories are too painful to share with the public, even when they have shaped everything good that followed. But this story, this moment when everything changed, belongs to every woman who has ever wondered if she deserves better. The answer is always yes. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions, support that doesn't come with strings attached, and relationships that lift you up rather than tear you down. The storm that brought Finn and me together in the worst moment of our lives also washed away everything that had been holding us back. In its wake, we built something beautiful, something strong, something that could weather any future storms because it was built on the unshakable foundation of genuine love and mutual respect. That little boy who was left alone in the rain grew up to be a young man who will never doubt his worth, who will never accept cruelty as the price of belonging, who will always know that he is loved completely and unconditionally. And his mother grew up too, finally becoming the woman she was always meant to be, once she stopped trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. The rain that fell that night washed away 34 years of accepting less than I deserved. What grew in its place was stronger than any storm.